So again, welcome to the Fund for New Citizens information session. I'm Eve Stotland, Senior Program Officer at New York Community Trust. And Nancy, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Nancy Yeh. I'm the coordinator for the Fund for New Citizens.
And we want to thank you for joining us and for all of the work that your organizations do to ensure that the city's immigrant communities and the city itself is able to thrive. Before we get started, a few logistics. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation. Please use the chat function to send us your questions if you have questions during the presentation. But there will also be a Q&A section at the end. And the Q&A section at the end will be both by chat and a time that people can unmute themselves and just ask us questions or have conversation. But during the presentation, if you can mute yourself, that would be terrific. The webinar, we're actually not sure. We've set aside 45 minutes. I'm not sure how long our presentation will take. Probably less than that, maybe half an hour. And then there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. It is being recorded, and we are happy to share the slides after the webinar. Next slide, please.
All right, so this is our agenda for today. So we just did our introductions. We're going to discuss what the Fund for New Citizens is. We're going to discuss what we fund, which I'm sure you're all curious about. Of course, who is eligible to apply. We do have some criteria that are quite strict about eligibility. We'll also answer questions on how to apply for the fund. We have some FAQs that come up every single year. And then, of course, at the very end, we'll have hopefully enough time for all of your questions. All right. So what is the Fund for New Citizens? We are a funder collaborative of 7 foundations. The foundations are listed on your screen. They include Altman, the Blaustein Foundation, Booth Ferris, FJC, IOLA, the New York Community Trust, which is us, and the North Star Fund. So our 7 funders work together to pool their money and then review and choose the grant or the nonprofits that we fund every single year. So it is a collaborative process. No one has veto power. It's all by discussion and negotiation.
Okay, so what are we funding this year? This year, and for those of you who are familiar with us, you'll see that this is not that different than recent years, although the fund's been around for over 30 years, so it has changed. But this is sort of in keeping with the last, 5-6 years. We will be making grants to support. Oh, that was a little exciting. It went blurry for a minute, at least on my screen. Immigration policy advocacy at the local or state levels. Community organizing and outreach around immigrant rights and access to services. Know your rights training and community education for immigrants and their families. And/or, meaning you can do just one of these things or all of these things. Advocacy and community organizing on behalf of immigrant communities, including responding to the health, education, or economic needs of newly arrived migrants. And up to $20,000 of your request can be not for any of these things, but towards technical assistance activities. And those are activities to strengthen your organization as an entity and to address administrative challenges. And so we'll talk more about that during the FAQs. But you can think about it this way. These grants are mostly for advocacy and education, and a piece of them for applicants and for those who win awards can be set aside, sort of earmarked for things like back office things like HR and computer systems and management challenges.
So our eligibility criteria listed again on the slide, but I'll just explain it a little bit. We fund smaller nonprofits. So you should have an annual budget between $200,000 and $3 million. The upper limit of that 3 million is a harder cutoff. The 200,000 we might be a little bit more generous with if you are a smaller nonprofit, but we will ask if you are chosen for a site visit about your financials, of course. Our applicants should have an office in New York City. We are looking for nonprofits who serve New York City residents and immigrants, of course, and our applicants will be immigrant-led. So this means that a majority of your board and staff are either immigrants or the children of immigrants. And then finally, of course, we're looking for applicants who have a track record of advocating for immigrant communities. If you are a newer nonprofit, this might mean that you are also partnering with larger organizations that serve immigrant communities around the city. For example, if you're part of the New York Immigration Coalition, that would be great, but not necessary, of course, but just an example of what that means. And this year, we have an open RFP. That means you do not need an invitation to apply. Anybody is welcome to apply, but you must be a nonprofit or you're working with a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. And if you're not sure what a fiscal sponsor is, we can get to that in the question section.
Okay, so we wanted to offer some tips to writing a strong proposal. And strong proposals, the first thing I'll say is they're not about length. 1 page is not going to be enough to tell us everything you do. You know, you really don't need 20 pages, 15 pages, even sometimes 10 pages to tell us about who you are and what you do. What you do need, and we strongly recommend, is that you make sure to touch on all of these things. So we certainly want you to tell us about who you are as an agency, but a paragraph on that is enough. After that, we really want you to focus on a particular effort or project rather than everything you do. This is particularly true for bigger groups. If a group is quite small in terms of finance, not in terms of power, because they're not the same things, but a group with a budget of $200,000 we've found usually does one thing. And so it is all of your work, because $200,000 in New York, unfortunately, doesn't go that far in terms of hiring staff, renting space. A group with a budget of more like 3 million usually is doing several initiatives, and we want you to ask us for support for one of those initiatives. And then we want you to tell us what you will do for that initiative as part of that initiative if you get the money. Again, tell us what you will do if you get the money. And include goals, your goal for the project and specific activities you will take to meet that goal. A list of 3 to 5 activities that you plan to complete during the 12-month grant period. And applicants who propose to use up to $20,000 of the grant for capacity building, that's a mouthful, should provide at least one activity tied to that work. Again, we're going to talk a bit more about capacity building later, but I'll give you some examples now of a project. A project could be to work on, get City Council to pass a particular law, and 3 to 5 activities about how you'll do that could include training people directly impacted by that law, to meet with City Council people and their staff to talk about why it's a good idea. It could include visits. It could include a social media campaign. It could include talking to the press. You know, these are all offered just by way of example, but they're examples of specific activities that a group can do towards meeting a particular project goal.
Next, about project budgets. So we get questions on the project budget every single year. So we figured we'd include this in the slides. So your project budget should list all of the costs needed to carry out what you're proposing. So this should include your personnel, your direct expenses, any overhead expenses or administrative expenses. So personnel, this is the staff who's working on the project directly. This could include partial salaries. So if you have a program director who's doing like 3 things at once, maybe it's just a partial salary for that program director for that particular project. Your direct expenses are things that are directly related to your project. So if your project is a social media campaign, you might hire somebody to work on that campaign. That would be part of your, and that person working on the campaign needs a specific technology. That could be a direct expense. And then finally, your administrative expenses need to be included. We do not have a cap on your administrative expenses. I guess some grants might require you to keep your administrative expenses limited to 10% of the budget. We do not have that cap, but you should list them. And if you file a Form 990 or a Form 990, I think what it's called, right? A Form 990, then it's the Part 9 section will list your administrative expenses, and that's what you want to give us. You should also include any funding from other sources in your project budget. So it could be confirmed funding. So if you have a grant from another nonprofit or another grant making organization that's already been confirmed, that should be listed for that particular project, that should be listed. And if it's pending, that should also be listed. You can just write pending next to it to let us know that you're still waiting for confirmation that about whether or not you received it. And then finally, if you would like a sample project budget, just as an example, you can reach out to us afterwards. We're happy to share an example. There's no specific format, like it doesn't need to be extremely fancy. It could just be a table in a Microsoft Word document. Totally fine, as long as you're listing your costs and your funding sources.
The project review process is pretty straightforward. It has 3 parts. The Fund for New Citizens will carefully review all the proposals. Every proposal submitted will be read. I personally will read every proposal submitted, and other members will read as many as they can. Fund members, that's the Fund for New Citizens members, will choose a small number of groups to get site visits. That should happen in July. And then we will make awards and inform the groups that have received grants and also those who have not received grants in fall. And the goal for that is for September.
So what are we looking for when we review these proposals? I mean, the first is that you meet our eligibility criteria. So that you are immigrant-led, that you have a budget between 200,000 and 3 million, everything that we listed on that slide previously. We're looking for projects that focus on advocacy, community education, and capacity building. It is important to know that when we say projects, again, we're not funding single events or conferences. It should be an ongoing project within the community. We are looking, as I mentioned, that you are working with other immigrant-led or community-based agencies, especially if you are a smaller group, maybe a newer group. It would be really helpful to know if you're working with, again, a bigger group organization like Make the Road or New York Immigration Coalition. Not necessary, but helpful to know. And then finally, we are looking to see if the project will help immigrants gain power. So are we empowering and educating the immigrants in our community to change the system or create new systems rather than advocating for them without their voice on the table in that sense.
Okay, we're up to this. Oh,
go ahead.
We're up to the frequently asked questions. What if my organization's budget is under 200,000 or more than 3 million? If it's just under 200,000, like it's not about $1 difference or something. So if you're really close on meeting the $200,000 threshold, go ahead and apply. If you're over 3 million, of course, we can't stop you from applying, but it's just not a good use of your time. If you have a budget of over 3 million, what I suggest is that you look to New York Community Trust directly for a grant. I put a link in the slide, and I can't check right now, but Nancy's going to drop it, I think, into the chat as well. It's also on our website, although full honesty, it's a little hard to find on our website. So you might want to hold on to that link because it saves you a bit of time. New York Community Trust has no cap for grant making. We like the Fund for New Citizens, you don't need an invitation to submit a grant proposal to New York Community Trust. Unlike the Fund for New Citizens this year is doing one request for proposals. This is it. When this one's over, we won't do another one for another year. New York Community Trust is very different. We accept proposals on an ongoing basis, on a rolling basis. There is no time at which a group can't submit an application. And again, no permission is needed. So if you have a budget of 3 million or over, please look at New York Community Trust. There's a lot of information at that link about what the trust funds. We certainly do fund many immigration related both services and advocacy efforts.
Eve, I have a couple questions in the
Sure.
comments to funding. So Abigail is asking, do you fund C4 organizations?
That is a terrific question. Most of the people on the call, your organizations are probably C3s, 501c3s. 501c4s are a bit different in that they are empowered to do much more lobbying. 501c3s can absolutely do lobbying, but 501c4s can do, like, they could spend their whole budget on lobbying if they wanted to, I believe. So New York Community Trust funds C4s. The Fund for New Citizens has some of our members cannot fund C4s. Remember, we have 7 members, and some of those members are family foundations, private foundations, and they are not permitted by IRS rules to fund C4s. So if you have a C4 that you want funding for, I would suggest looking at New York Community Trust directly. Or you could think about looking to a fiscal sponsor who it is a 501c3, and a C4 could get funding through a fiscal sponsor. The fiscal sponsor generally does take a fee for that, but we are very comfortable with that if you are. So there is a way to get funding to a C4 effort through a fiscal sponsor.
And then Edward Kerner is asking, can you apply for both the Fund for New Citizens and the New York Community Trust?
Yes, you can. If you are eligible for Fund for New Citizens, you should apply to Fund for New Citizens. And that does not limit you at all from applying to New York Community Trust. It's one way to think about it is 2 different pots of money. New York Community Trust has money that it awards every year for many, many different initiatives and causes. And then we are part of a separate, we designate a separate amount of money to be part of the Funder Collaborative and to create a pool of money that is the Fund for New Citizens, or that funds the Fund for New Citizens.
Eve, can I follow up that question with another frequently asked question
Yes.
that I sometimes get, which is, can you apply for both for the same project, or does it need to be different projects?
That is such an interesting question. I think it would be better to apply for a different project unless, so really have to think about the cost of the project. You know, really, does the same project need and able to use funding from both sources? If the answer is yes, especially because Fund for New Citizens grants are fairly small, there also becomes a concern that New York Community Trust is too much of your budget because we are a short-term funder. But there's also no, anybody can apply, like, go ahead and try. There's not a rule against it. But I'd say you might think about applying for 2 different things.
Jael is asking, what is the average size of the Fund for New Citizens award?
That is a terrific question. Last year, they ranged from 45,000 to 70,000. And I don't know an average, but I'm gonna ballpark it and say 60,000. But again, we want to see the cost of the work that you're doing. We may not be able to fund it all, especially, you know, there's inflation. Everybody I know is committed to paying their staff as fairly as possible, as generously as possible. So it's pretty easy to get up to 60,000. But we want to look at the actual cost of the project, and especially the actual unfunded cost of the project. Meaning, if you've already raised some funds, that's amazing. Please let us know. That it's fine if you haven't, but if you have, that means you've already, you know, you've already had some funding to start, and to get a lead on things. And so we're going to look at your actual budget that you propose and see how, if it's a match, how we can help.
And then finally, if your fiscal sponsor budget is over 3 million, but your budget is not, is that okay?
Yes. If your fiscal sponsor is over 3 million, I'm going to name one again, just by way of example. We've had many grantees at the Fund for New Citizens that used the Fund for the City of New York as their fiscal sponsor. The Fund for the City of New York's operating budget is well over 3 million. It's not a problem. That's the fund's budget, not our grantees' budget.
Okay.
There are many other fiscal sponsors. I don't want to say that we prefer any particular fiscal sponsor. As long as, and many groups prefer to have smaller fiscal sponsors that are particularly mission aligned, and those exist as well. But I listed probably the most common one.
And I just typed that name in the comments if you didn't catch it. Fund for the City of New York. Okay. So this is another frequently asked question that we receive. What does it mean that $20,000 of the grant can be used for technical assistance? So technical assistance or capacity building is what you use to make your organization stronger. So it's not dedicated towards your project specifically, or to advocacy or to services. It's about your organization as itself. So an example could be to train your staff. Staff training is very important. Perhaps you have a new software that you want to roll out. You need to train your staff to use that software. You could dedicate up to $20,000 of the grant that you apply for to training your staff. Maybe you are now large enough for a federal audit, and you have to prepare for that. You can dedicate some money to preparing for a federal audit. You can dedicate some money to hiring a consultant who might fix up your software or your website or your social media. So again, this is stuff that makes you stronger as an organization, but does not directly relate to your project or any of the services that you provide to the community. Up to 20,000. So that doesn't mean that you have to dedicate the full 20,000 to capacity building. You could dedicate 5,000 if you just need 5,000, or 10,000 if you just need 10,000. But unfortunately, no more than 20,000. So if you're applying for a $60,000 grant, 40,000 for your project budget, 20,000 for capacity building is a common split. Okay.
Another question that we got a lot: what is the difference between an organizational budget and a project budget? Again, I'm going to say that for some groups, they are the same. Let's take the example of a group with a budget of $200,000 that does is working on one campaign, let's say one workers' rights campaign, that the project budget and the organizational budget may be the same thing. Let's take a contrary example, a group that has $3 million and is working, does some direct services and is working on 3 campaigns. The organizational budget is going to list that group's income and expenses for the entire organization for the fiscal year, for those direct services, for back office, for all 3 campaigns that they're working on. In contrast, a group with a budget, for example, of 3 million A project budget is going to list the income and expenses for the particular project described in the proposal. Let's say a Know Your Rights initiative for a certain immigrant group. And it's going to be the Know Your, some people find it helpful to give that project a name. That project may already have a name. It may have a name in a language other than English. Tell us the name in the language that you share it with, that you usually use, and then please translate it into English. But let's say it's the Know Your Rights camp, the Know Your Rights project. Then you're going to give us your organizational budget for everything you do, and then a project budget that's going to show just the budget, the income and expenses for this Know Your Rights initiative. And specifically for 12 months of the Know Your Rights initiative.
Oh, yes, we should mention that we provide 1-year awards. So your project doesn't necessarily have to complete in 1 year, but the funding will be for a single year.
Yes, and I would say it's very rare that we fund it. Since I've been involved in the Fund for New Citizens, let's see. Well, I'd say many of our grantees 2 years ago were involved in the Fund for Excluded Workers. And in a sense, helping people apply and making sure that they knew about the Fund for Excluded Workers was something that ended in 1 year. But then again, nice contrast, the fight, the campaign, the work to try and win unemployment protections for all workers, regardless of immigration status or kind of work, is not a 1-year fight, and continues on. So yes, absolutely does not need to be something that will complete in 1 year, but all of the grants will be 1-year grants.
All right, so it's just some important reminders. Our deadline is May 3rd at 5 p.m. So you will need to upload your application to that portal by 5 p.m. I'm going to drop the link into the chat right now if you'd like to save it. I recommend that you do save it. If you are having any trouble using the portal, it can be a little finicky, just email us. We are happy to help. You can email either myself or Eve. You can start with myself, and I'm not super responsive, maybe try Eve, but I promise I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. When you upload your application, it needs to be in one complete PDF. So if you have separate documents for your budget and for your proposal itself, please try to combine those together. We have instructions, I believe, on how to do that on the portal. So if you click into the link, I'm going to show you the next slide. If you click into the link, this is what the portal looks like. We are the Fund for New Citizens 2023 RFP here at the bottom. If you click download instructions, we'll have detailed instructions on how to apply, as well as the eligibility criteria relisted. And then you can click this link to apply right here where you submit your proposal.
And I'll just say, download instructions. I wish we could change this, but as you can see, it's standardized for all of both for our New York Community Trust ongoing competitive grants. That's where people, thank you, Nancy. That's how people apply to New York Community Trust, and then Fund for New Citizens. But what's different is the instructions for Fund for New Citizens are not just instructions on how to apply, they are the requests for proposals. So they lay out all of that criteria about who's eligible and what we're funding and what we're looking for is all in there too, which is not the case with the instructions for the New York Community Trust ongoing competitive grants. So if you're like, but where's the RFP for the Fund for New Citizens? You can also always, we dropped in the link. You also can always email us and ask us, and we'll send you a PDF of it. But also it is here. The RFP for the Fund for New Citizens is here, but it is, Nancy, if you can get your cursor to that is where the RFP is living on the website. And I'm sorry, it's so hard to find, but it can always be easy because you can always, if you're having any trouble, just email us and we will send it to you. We'll send you the link, and if the link's not working or that's not good, we can make a PDF of it and send you in fact, we have a PDF of it and we can send you the PDF. We don't want anybody to not apply because of this portal
Yes.
situation. Okay, so like most people are going to have no problem with the portal, but if you have a problem with the portal, please don't give up because of that. Like that would just be really not what we want to have happen. We can work around it. If the portal is not working for you, let us know. We'll either fix it or we won't use it for you. Like try to use it, but it's never our intent. It's always our intention that everybody who wants to apply, who's eligible to apply, gets to apply. But there is a deadline.
Yes. May 3rd, 11:59 p.m.
There we go.
I'm going to just show the screen with our emails if you want to write them down, and then we can open up. We have about 12 minutes-ish left for questions. I already see one in the chat. How many awards do we anticipate this year?
We anticipate about 8 awards this year. We have a smaller pool of money this year, a smaller pot of money. And so unfortunately, that does mean fewer awards. So about 8. But we're always trying to raise more funds. So it could change. And it's also always possible that some groups will want smaller grants. So that's not set. That's what we anticipate. It's what we think will happen is about 8 grants.
The size of the grants, though, will still stay the same, about 40,000 to 70,000, unless someone asks for something smaller. If there are any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Hi, I have a question. If our organization already has a program in progress, could this project be an extension of that, or does it have to be a whole new project?
Great question. So the question is, does the Fund for New Citizens fund only new projects? We will fund ongoing projects. This does not have to be new in any way. But we do need to know in the coming, let's say, year, 12 months, what new activity, sorry, they don't have to be new activities. So let's say every year, let's say I'm a group and every year we do monthly Know Your Rights trainings. My group can apply for funding to do those monthly Know Your Rights trainings this coming year, but we have to do like 12 more of them, right? Like it has to be, the grants are for work that has not already been done. It's for grants, the grants are for work to be done in the future, but they can be work that you have been doing for years.
Thank you.
We just need to know that there's a need for it, and you are all the experts about what there's a need for. So please explain in your proposal what you're doing, the exact, not exact, but specifics about the activities you'll engage in and why those activities are the right activities for the people that you work with, for the people that you are, for the people for your group and your community. Does not need to be a new thing. There are funders and funding opportunities that are just for new initiatives or for sometimes even just for new nonprofits. This is not one. We fund brand new, the Fund for New Citizens is open to funding both brand new nonprofits and nonprofits that have been around for years, brand new activities or activities that people have been doing for years. And in fact, thinking back to our most recent grantees, there's a mix, both in how long the nonprofits have been in existence, and also a mix of are these new activities or are these activities that are or even campaigns that people have been working on for some time. Other questions? Again, fine to put them in the chat or to just unmute yourself and ask. I'll give a moment because sometimes it's a lot of information, especially if you didn't have a chance to look at the request for proposals in advance. It's a lot of information to take in. So I'm going to give it another moment for people to ask questions. Again, or I shouldn't say again, we should let you know you have our emails. So you may email us with questions as well. However, it's nice to talk while we're all together, because if you have a question, it's very likely that somebody else has the same question. And also this way, we can make sure that we've actually answered your question. Okay, it looks like Maria has another question.
Yes.
Please.
I may have missed this, but what is the grant period again?
12 months. I would say September, starting September 2023. Oh my goodness, yes, September 2023. Sorry about that. Thinking about it in the future, I always have to think, it'll still be the same calendar year, September 2023 or October 2023, because it depends a little bit when you actually, we have our process and we will pick grantees, but then the grant period doesn't start until the grant seekers actually get the funds, right? And that can take not a long time, but a few weeks for that process to happen. So September, October. I know, let's say the grant period starts fall 2023. However, if it's easier to, yeah, let's just do it that. Sorry, I was going to give another option, but I think that's the easiest actually. Fall 2023. Other questions? Nancy, anything you want to add?
No, I think that is all. I just want to reiterate that this is being recorded. We will share the recording and we will share the slides. They will both be available online and to those of you who attended.
Thank you so much for attending. We really look forward to reading this year's proposals. We know how much work and time it takes, and we are very grateful that you spend the time to tell us about your work. Obviously, the goal is to get a grant, but I want you to know that every time we run one of our requests for proposals, we learn so much, absolutely from the grant proposals that we're able to fund, but also from those that we are not able to fund. And sometimes that influences grant making down the road. So I want you to know that every proposal is read and that the proposals really help us understand what we should be funding in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing.